Thank you so much for joining us here for today's webinar, Coping During Times of Crisis, Creating Stability When Life is Unstable. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the manager of Public Education Partnerships and E-Learning at Mental Health America's National Office, and I'll be helping to moderate today's session. I have just a few notes for everyone before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like to request a certificate of attendance, I have a link that you can fill out a form. We'll send you one of those afterwards. I'll post the link in the chat here shortly, and I will also include that in your follow-up email. So if you have any trouble getting it out of the chat, don't worry, you'll get it again. We might have some time today too for some Q&A at the end with our two panelists. So please add your questions in the chat, add comments, resources, share in there. I'll be keeping an eye on it and pulling any questions for our speakers. For today's topic, we have a really relevant and important topic to discuss. I think we all know we're living in a world where we have a lot going on right now, especially with access to 24-hour news. We know everything that's going on, even if we're not experiencing it personally. And with that being said, a lot of people are experiencing a lot of things personally. There have been a lot of external crises in the past few years. People might be experiencing impacts of natural disasters, community violence, political tensions, so many experiences. And today we just want to hold space for that and talk through how you can best cope in those times of uncertainty, those times of crisis, and especially for those who are living with mental health conditions, how we can prepare for that and have tools ready to really best support our mental health. So before we jump into discussion with our two lovely panelists, I want to share a resource from Mental Health America that is one of our new resources. Recently, we have created a crisis resource center, and I'm going to pop that link in the chat here right now. This resource center has information for anyone who might be experiencing a personal crisis, a personal mental health crisis, dealing with the aftermath of a disaster, coping with the effects of violence, abuse, or discrimination. This resource center really provides you with information to help navigate those difficult times and try and find some peace and coping skills through your recovery. I invite you to check out those resources after our session today and also share them with folks that you know. I'll include those links in the follow-up materials as well. So now, without further ado, I would love to invite our panelists. Today, I'm joined by two individuals who are incredible, and I want each of them to share a little bit about themselves. Give us some background on you and what perspective you're bringing to today's topic. With us today, we have Palissa and Helen joining. Welcome, ladies. Either of you who wants to kick us off, give us a greeting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Palissa Osetutu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am currently in Virginia, Northern Virginia to be exact. So I saw a few Virginians in here. Hello. I have been in the field of mental health now for approximately 23 years. I am a graduate of Howard University. I'm bringing the immigrant perspective. I'm bringing the Black African diaspora perspective, as well as the woman perspective and just general human who has had the opportunity to be people have trusted me with some of their deepest, darkest secrets, and I've just been had the pleasure of helping them navigate it. And so this is just another opportunity to do that today. So I'm so happy to be a part of this again. I think it's been about 2.5 years since the last time. So thank you, Jackie, for inviting me, as well as Mental Health America.
Alyssa, I really love how personal you just got there. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Garcia. My pronouns are she, her. I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm the oldest child of Filipino immigrant parents. My family has actually been through religious and even like immigrant persecution. So fleeing to the country was one of the firsthand experiences I got. I see that there are people here from California and even Italy. So I'm excited to just bring a new perspective. I specialize in Asian American therapy and multi-generational trauma and PTSD and anxiety, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you both. We are really grateful that you're able to join us in this space today. Thank you for being here. We'll kind of jump right in. I know I gave that intro and we talked about we're living in this world where there's so many things that can be adding extra stress on people's lives on top of just the daily stress, these really big and heavy things. And there's been a lot this year. So while everyone's trying to manage their own daily stress, there's this added of larger events, crises that impact individuals on a very different level. How have you seen a shift in mental health in 2024 or in these past few years?
Oh, I think that the world we moved from people not knowing what was happening on the other side of the world to now knowing everything in real time. And I think that most people are compassionate, most people are empathic. And so hearing all this information and not being able to do something with it is it's an unsettling feeling. So what I'm seeing more of in with my practice and the work that I'm doing is people coming in feeling more helpless than before. When you only knew what was going on in your immediate community, it was a lot easier to do something about it, right? You could, okay, I can go volunteer. I can adopt a family for the holidays. But when you hear about what's going on in Palestine, the Ukraine, the Congo, it's like, well, what can I do but feel terrible? And so I think what part of what I'm seeing is people having to be okay with not being able to fix it and really being able to say, what can I do in my micro world that still has a macro effect? So that's the big shift I'm seeing. And also a lot of caretakers who have this, tendency to want to take care of everyone else, really recognizing that they're stretching themselves way too thin and they have to pull back. So I think what we're seeing a lot more of is the post-COVID effect. So even if some of the more recent events hadn't occurred, we would still be having people still coming out of the long-term effects of the COVID shutdown and how it changed our world forever.
Yeah, I want to answer this question by zooming out a little bit and looking at the last 5 years of our political climate. I think we've encountered more political division, a lot more of an understanding of our intersectional identities and cultural identities, and how our physical appearance really does play a role in the judgments we face day to day. I actually became a therapist and graduated from graduate school around the time of COVID. And I saw a shift going from people being afraid to talk about their mental health to being excited to delve into their mental health. And so, since starting my practice, becoming an associate therapist, and then becoming a licensed therapist, I've seen a huge culmination in just need, especially with the rise in Asian American hate crimes, with people who just want to understand, like, what is this anxiousness and depression that I feel? I'm encountering more and more people who have what's called high functioning anxiety, where they can go to work, they can get everything done, but they have to come home and take care of their elderly parents. Or, with the economic crisis, sometimes they're tight on resources economically and even psychologically. There's a huge like cognitive load that we have to face. A lot of the clients that I work with are women of color who unfortunately feel the burden of taking care of their autistic and neurodivergent siblings while also caretaking for their elderly immigrant parents. And so, where are the resources and mutual aids and peer supports during times of isolation? But the positive of all of this too is that we're having more of these types of conversations around why is mental health necessary? And for folks that are curious or just starting to learn about what mental health is about, therapy has been shown to decrease long-term illness because stress has been shown to be a predominant factor in what leads to chronic illnesses around the world. So if anything, I'm glad as a profession that more and more people are talking about mental health and why it's important because our brain and our brain patterns, unfortunately, are stimulated by a lot of fear and insecurities. So those are some of the shifts that I've seen in 2024 and even in the last 5 years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for that. Melissa, did you want to add on?
I did. Helen had mentioned earlier that some of the work she's doing is also around generational trauma. And I do think that's something else that's come out a lot more in the last few years is people really wanting to be the ones to end the trauma for their bloodline, for their family line. And sometimes it's a difficult position to be in, to be the one to say, hey, you know there's something wrong and we have to do something about it. We
Yeah.
used to call those folks the black sheep, but I call them the truth sayers, the brave ones. And so I think that this conversation has opened it up for families to really start tackling it. So yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that Helen, you're another person on the list of those tackling this issue.
To your
Yeah.
point, sorry to interrupt you, Jackie, but to your point, Melissa, I think that, a lot of the behaviors that we're oftentimes confused about, why we're so anxious, like it does come from the multi-generational trauma that we experience. Our relationship with our mother and our father is just one piece of the puzzle compared to what their relationships were with their grandparents. So there's all of those things factoring into what makes an individual interesting in their own right. And Esther Perel always talks about how all of us have a different melody. And so sometimes when we meet someone, we think that it's just a simple cadence of da da da, but there's something so interesting about you don't know if it's going to go that melody. Sometimes it goes da 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 da. Like everyone has a different story. And I think that I've learned not to assume things about people anymore since encountering what I've encountered as a therapist. One of the things that I really love about my job is that despite going through trauma, people find ways to discover joy in their lives, to find people and friends that they can open up to and be more vulnerable to. So, despite, encountering so many issues, I really do believe that individuals in and of themselves have a lot of hope and joy and are capable of a lot of I don't like to say resilience because that word has become taboo, but strength, a lot of strength in every human being.
Absolutely. Beautifully said by both of you. And I appreciate that lens on that hope and strength and joy and this positive side too, that we are having these conversations, that it's out in the open, we're talking about it. I know someone in the chat had made a comment about that too. There's more education happening around mental health. People are more aware of it. And I think during that COVID time, it kind of broke down that barrier of this is something that we need to address and it's okay to talk about. Even though there is still a lot of stigma integrated into our lives and into different communities in different ways, but we are starting to have those conversations. And I love that point about the joy and the strength. It's a good reminder. I want to kind of shift the conversation to talking about individuals who are living with mental health conditions. A lot of times these added events can be a trigger for more intensified symptoms, or they might take this in different ways. So how can individuals with mental health conditions try to prepare for times of crisis or times of uncertainty?
I believe that humans are not insular human beings. So I think now more than ever, having friendship, having community groups, faith groups, and even being able to understand the value of therapeutic practices is extremely important. I think as human beings, we don't really understand the power of being able to go to a community of people and share our shame with other folks. It really does take away a lot of the mental load. Even speaking things into existence really does make a huge difference. Another thing that I also suggest is there are things that you can do for free that you don't have to pay doctors or anyone else. Things like breathing, going on long walks, journaling, physical exercise are all really simple tricks and hacks that you can use to make sure that you kind of take yourself out of these anxious or depressive states. There's a lot of value in simplicity of sometimes it's worth not just typing on a desk. If you find yourself getting into an anxious state, a change of scenery is really helpful. If you have the privilege of even going outside for a walk and taking in some vitamin D, it really does help your mental well-being. Prioritizing yourself. I know and saw in the chat that there are some caregivers here. Sometimes taking care of yourself in those small, simple ways, going on a nice drive, are some of the things that you can use in order to come back to yourself. One thing that I always tell clients in my practice is there's a difference between doing and being. I think in our society, we do a lot of things, but we're not being with ourselves. And so, one reflective question I'd like to ask for the audience is what are some things that you can do to come back to yourself and to be with yourself? And so, what is that rest? So, I'll end with that.
I think that yeah, there isn't one specific solution. And I think sometimes that's one of the things I see is that people one size fits all, and what I may enjoy that is my release. Some people will say, "Oh, I really like vacuuming." Somebody else would say, "Oh my gosh, that's torture." And but it's like, does this give you the opportunity to temporarily disconnect? Because some people aren't in the position to take a long drive for whatever reason. They may not be able to, because of mobility issues, maybe not take a long walk. But I think the big thing is getting away from this idea that self-care has to be this grandiose thing, getting your nails done or going to the spa for the whole day. I've told people sometimes that phone ringing, and it's that one particular person or people who usually call because they need something, saying to yourself, I can't take that call right now. Um, Recognizing sleep, when we have mental health conditions, we know a lot of times our sleep is either too much, not enough, inconsistent. Like, what can I do to better my sleep? What can I do to change my environment for sleep? Sometimes I'll share a personal, when I lost my brother unexpectedly, a friend of mine asked me, said, "What can I do for you, friend?" And I said, just at the end of the day, can you just check on me to see, did I eat? And did I drink water? And she was like, that's it. And I said, yes, because I know I've seen my grief makes me miss out, not do those things for myself. And she felt so good because she was like, I didn't know what to do. And yes, I have the gift of having that level of self-awareness. But like just those little basic things. If you are notorious for taking a 5-minute shower, take a 10-minute shower. I have a whole series of those essential oils. I don't have time to take a bath, so I'll just like drop it on the bottom of the pan of the shower and just breathe. So I think when we're dealing with mental health conditions, we just have to take a little extra step. And then we don't need to have 10 people who will check on us, but just identifying the one. and getting that one to do a little extra something during this particular time. It's like, okay, right now, I need that one to maybe check on me more. So I think that's definitely it. If you have a therapist, follow up with the therapist. Community, if church fills your cup, and you notice you're not going, ask a buddy from church if they can ride with you or something like that. But I think those very small things go a very long way.
Mm. I had a professor say to me once, I held my bladder for too long at one meeting, and he looked at me and he said, Helen, sometimes using the bathroom is self-care. And I didn't think because I don't know if any of y'all listening have ever encountered this, but I was always told I couldn't use the bathroom until a certain time of day. And sometimes self-care could be as simple as if you need to use the restroom, use the restroom. I know that there are some people that one of my closest friends works at a front desk. She honors her bladder. And so being able to just do that is giving yourself a sense of energy and respect, you know? I see Vivian said yes, yes, yes. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Absolutely. I think in this kind of go, go, go United States capitalistic world, we're being pushed, especially on social media too, of like self-care has to look like a day at the spa, or I think you said, Melissa, like getting your nails done, these things that we're being told. And if you can't afford to do that, or you don't have the means to do that, you don't have access to self-care. But self-care is so much more than that. It's those basic things you can do to really take care of your body, your soul, your mind in the ways that you need. And so those small things, like, yes, Helen, just going to the bathroom when you need to, taking those moments, maybe not answering that phone call. Those are the things that can make a difference in your day. Thank you everyone for sharing yours in the comments. I really enjoyed seeing those, and I think there's some good ideas there we can all take. I know that there's those things we can do to try to promote our self-care, try and have routines so that when the unexpected, we're able to keep that routine. We're able to try and continue to care for ourselves. But what are some effective tools and techniques to maintain our mental well-being during that prolonged crisis or time of stress? Any suggestions for the folks listening there?
I mean, we have some of the standards. Yes, we have deep breathing, but sometimes just breathing. I mean, how often do we hear a conversation and you see people like they're literally holding their breath, and sometimes it's like, just breathe. So ideally, in our world, the deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing is what we want to achieve for. But I think the biggest thing is just taking out the time to breathe and also checking in with your physical body. A lot of times when we're really tuned in to things going on, we lean forward. And so then what happens is we're putting so much pressure up here. So anybody who has gotten a massage or needed to work with a chiropractor, they'll say like, oh, you're very tight up here. It's because that's our tendency, is to lean forward, pull in. And so sometimes just remembering, where is my body, and leaning back. And then you add the breathing with it, and you would find just some relief in that. Yoga, you don't have to be a yoga expert. Some of those very simple, just stretching. A lot of times we do hold our trauma, our stress in our physical body and the fascia of our body, being able to just release it. And thankfully, YouTube, there's enough free options on there. You can pull something up for like a 5 minute. It doesn't even have to be long, but just the fact is reminding ourselves that you are so worth it, that even if it is just 5 minutes, you can do it. You deserve to do it. Food, diet, colorful food makes a difference. And so that's like one of the easiest things to remember is picking up colorful foods, red bell peppers, yellow bell peppers, all of those things help turn on those wonderful neurotransmitters in our brains that make us feel good. Yes, sometimes the comfort foods might be the carby ones, but sometimes we can say, okay, how do I balance that out? So I like to try to stick to the basics first, which is paying attention to our physical body. Um, and then, of course, the talk therapy piece, talking it out with someone who is just going to listen. And sometimes we have to tell people, I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to help. I just need you to listen, and getting it out makes a big difference. And then anybody who's familiar with tapping, uh, I'm a huge proponent of acupuncture, but again, that's something not everyone has the means to do. But please check more health insurances are covering acupuncture, whether they're paying for it or they reimburse for it. Um, some are starting to get the memo that prevention, doing things that don't involve pharmaceuticals actually are more effective. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Melissa, as you were talking, I was writing down some points. I was like, oh, I forgot to say this. But there's something valuable about checking in with your five senses. So what I mean by that is sometimes we don't realize that we're going through burnout or even or mental health crises until it's too late. And so early on in my career as a therapist, my right eye started twitching. Like it was weird when you would meet with a client and you would want them to heal, but your right eye is twitching. It's like, get better, but your body is just breaking down. Tension in your shoulders. How often do your eyes flicker? Sometimes hair loss. It can be a huge sign of burnout. Even fatigue, the things that are simple to send, like an email or even a phone call or a deadline you have to meet, you no longer have the energy to do so. And so there's a couple of therapies you can do for that. I saw some folks say that tapping was helpful for them. I would also say there's a lot of value in being able to acknowledge when you've reached your limit. And so, what does that look like? Oftentimes, our bodies know more than our minds do when it comes to completion of a task. If you do have ADHD or any sort of neurodivergence, sometimes attending to your biological needs first and understanding when your optimal time for deep work is extremely important for maintaining your mental health. Another thing I also wrote down is I think as a woman, two things I find myself being really rigid about is exercise and what I should eat. And so I saw someone in the chat say that they made Korean japchae, and food can be incredibly healing. I'm Filipino, so I really love going back to my roots and figuring out, what's something my mom used to make me that brings joy to my stomach and also my heart. And one thing I always tell clients is, are you shoulding yourself? I should exercise, I should walk, I should do XYZ. Sometimes self-care is being able to take that should outside of your mind and say, what could I do with the feelings and mad that I feel? Um, I also want to say thank you to all of the Filipinos out there who are talking about Filipino chicken adobo and ube. You see me. But so far, those are all of the notes that I took down. But another practical point I'd also like to share is if you have trouble planning, perhaps you can set a daily timer on your phone to just check in with your mental state 3 times a day or even once a day. Because sometimes we're so caught up in the doing that we forget to check in with how we're feeling. So make sure to do that as well.
And if you have pets, they they can bring us so much joy and peace, and sometimes they're the reason why we do take that little mini walk, or take out time to cuddle. So again, like there are things that we do have at home that don't require a lot of money, time or effort. And I saw some people mention in the chat about the 988. That's definitely an option. Like I said, I'm in the state of Virginia. There's a new initiative in Virginia where they now have licensed and non-licensed providers who are starting to offer free mental health care for those who don't have health insurance. And in the local hospitals, Fairfax Hospital just opened a wing called the Empathy wing, and it's an in-between for where you're not having a large-scale psychiatric crisis, meaning you're not suicidal, homicidal, or not having a psychotic breakdown, but you are struggling, whether it's feeling very depressed, very overwhelmed. And so that unit is specifically for people who are feeling overwhelmed, which I'm really excited that that's been open. So again, the message has been heard. Your voices have not been ignored because these things are opening up. It used to be one extreme or the other, right? It was, you were going to the psych hospital because all hope was lost. But now it's like, no, let's support before we get there. So I think that's sometimes, yes, it requires a little bit of research, but depending on where you live, there are some places that have more resources than others, but we are getting there.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And that empathy wing sounds fantastic. Just like such progress being made in the way that our systems can care for people. It's wonderful. I know a few people in the chat are mentioning peer support too, and that's such a great one. Being able to connect with someone who is going through something similar or has gone through something similar can be really, really beneficial. And thank you to all of our peer support specialists who are on the line for the ways that you're supporting individuals in your communities. These have all been really helpful tips, and I know people are saying that in the comments too, so thank you. They're very actionable, very easy to implement. But I think one thing that I hear from people a lot, especially when we talk about taking care of yourself, and especially for parents or caregivers, of I just don't have the time. There's other things I have to do first. And I'd love to hear from you on just how individuals can find that balance of caring for themselves with the demands of life, especially in these times of uncertainty or times where they may be going through extra stress.
I think that we have to be more realistic about the word balance when it comes to human existence, because like you said earlier, we live in a capitalistic society, and there's demands that come along with it for us to maintain some of the lifestyles that we have. So what I see it more as is, how do you picture being on a seesaw, and how do you make sure you're not always the one down here or the one up here? How do you do this where you eventually achieve here? You see it, even if it's for a glimmer, but then maybe you come back up here and do this. So I think there's that because there's so many things about our world that are out of our control. Sometimes that's why the extreme imbalance happens. So I think sometimes looking at that, what can you realistically take off your plate? There's some things we can't. And then there's other things, it's like, I like to use the word outsource. What can you outsource? I've met parents who well, I do this and I do this. And I said, well, why can't the teacher do that? Isn't that something that can be taken care of on the school's end? Do you have to do it on your end? In your neighborhood, if you have other moms, dads, like, can you come up with your own little mini co-op where you say, okay, can you sit with them at the playground for 1 hour while I get to do this? I think we can be creative. I do think that's part of what we've gotten away from is the sense of community in some of our neighborhoods, and how can we bring that back? Because most children, that's what they want. They, they go outside, they can meet somebody in a second. So how do we not take that away from them and then also allow ourselves to breathe? And moving away from that guilt of this, I'm the parent, I'm supposed to provide everything for my child, and if I don't, I'm somehow failing. And sometimes having honest conversations with our elders about what life was really like for them as parents, because what I'm finding in my big age, as they say, is there's way more similarities with some of those thoughts you have about if you're doing a good job that your parents had, your grandparents had, that they didn't say out loud. But now that we're all adults, they're now willing to say, actually, and I think that's actually ends up being very comforting. So that's I really could talk about this one for a long time, but I love to hear Helen's input.
Melissa, thanks for going first because that was a really difficult question to answer. I'm not a parent myself, and so, but I am really close to my parents, and I have counseled a lot of moms and fathers, grandparents, etc. And one of the things I don't want to take away is the immense responsibility that parents and caregivers have to take on each and every day. You're not just saying yes to taking care of a child, you're saying yes to a 24/7 job, day in and day out. And it's easy for me to say, wake up earlier or make sure to prioritize yourself. But I think being a parent, from what I've seen and the relationship I have with my own parents, is it's kind of more like jazz than it is like pop. What I mean by that is there's so much improv that you have to learn to do day in and day out. And I think one of the things that I've learned to work with clients is can we look at it from an objective standpoint and not so much a subjective standpoint. And this is a really effective intervention for folks with OCD as well, where sometimes we judge our own actions and intentions before really looking at the context of the situation. And so, number one is, how are you thinking about your parenting style? Are you having a negative self-critic coming up day in and day out? And who do you go to in those times of need? One of my close friends actually just had a baby, and they don't sleep. So, like, understanding that perhaps there's a deadline to that where your child will eventually get the sleep necessary, but is there a possibility that you can understand the beginning and the end of that date, and be gentle with yourself that it's normal to go through stress in life, and stress is extremely okay. But I think being able to ask for help, I think in our society, sometimes being able to reach out to our loved ones or even friends and family for caretaking is something that we don't want to be too much of a burden. But you're the person carrying this family if you're a single parent or if you're an individual who feels like they take on more of the caretaking responsibilities. So, is there a way that we can reach out to our communities or even be able to get a sitter for a night so that you can go on a date night? Because I think carving out that time for yourself will allow you to have more energy for the future. So, that's the answer I can provide given the understanding that I have thus far.
Thank you both. Yeah,
I
go for it, Melissa.
I was gonna say, somebody in the comment section said something, I think her name was Anna. It's sometimes asking yourself, what would I say to my friend? That's always a good one. So thank you for that reminder, because the compassion we tend to have for others, we don't give back to ourselves. And so that's such a great reminder. Like, if your friend came to you and was saying, this is what I'm going, are you going to just say, we'll figure it out? No, you're more likely to either help them with solutions or just hold a space for them. So we really have to remember to hold a space for ourselves, to give ourselves grace, to be able to say, like, I really did try my best today. and this is what I was able to do. And I think that that also goes a long way. And sometimes don't go back and look at that Facebook or Instagram, TikTok, whatever else is out now, post, because what is that? Comparison is the thief of joy. Yeah.
Mhm.
I butcher those euphemisms, but I think that's another thing too, is sometimes just stay away from the social media.
Yeah. You reminded me of something, Plis. I have a friend who has 3 children, all under the age of 10. And she recently went on her first vacation after almost a decade of taking care of the kids. And one of the things that she shared with me was, Helen, I forgot what my favorite food was. Like, I think about what my husband likes to eat, what my children like to eat, and I forgot what I liked wearing. And so that's something really simple and easy to remind yourself of, as women or as mothers, sometimes we can get so caught up in our children liking pineapple on their pizza that we forget what we like on our pizza. Do we even like pizza? And so maybe giving yourself the treat of your favorite food outside of your family and kids, where is there one thing you don't have to share this time? So that's one tip that I remembered just now.
I love that. They're so good, Alyssa and Helen. Those are such good reminders. And I'm seeing in the comments, yeah, multiple people just saying, I'm really good at helping others. I'm taking care of others. I forget to take care of myself. And it's easy to, instill that in the people around us and kind of forget to hold true to allowing ourselves to do those things too. And that's why I love your point, Melissa, about what would you tell a friend when you're feeling kind of down on yourself and it's hard to give yourself that same grace? Would I be saying this to my friend? When I say something, some negative self-talk, I even have friends that'll come, would you say that to me? Would you say that to me, the thing that you're saying about yourself? And it's like, no, I would never say that about you. Well, why are you saying that about yourself? The way that we nurture ourselves is so important too. So thank you for that. I want to talk about one thing that I know we brought up a couple times in the beginning of our conversation, just about how different the world is that we're living in today, where we're constantly overwhelmed by news. We have our phones on us, TVs, radios. It seems like at some way we have constant access to see what's going on. We're getting notifications, we're getting alerts. And that's heavy when we're constantly taking in information. And as humans, being able to process not only the world we're experiencing right now, but having to process everything going on everywhere else in the world is a lot. And I think that has a major effect on our mental health too. So I'd love to hear from each of you kind of what effect does that have on people's mental health that you're seeing, and how can we start to work to build and create boundaries to protect ourselves from information overload and technology, social media, news, all of those things?
I think Thanksgiving is the perfect example for what you're talking about, Jackie. It's unfortunate that right after this season of gratitude and giving, we're bombarded with messages about Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Giving Tuesday. There's nothing wrong with Giving Tuesday because it's important to be generous. But I think about how, there was a statistic I read the other day that Americans are plagued with 5,000 ads a day. And so that much, as soon as we log on to our computer, go on YouTube, listen to a podcast, go outside, we see thousands and thousands of ads. And it's not just from marketing, it's also what we wear on our bodies. And so it's one thing for me to say you should avoid all social media. I don't think that's realistic given our society today, but I will say if you can have boundaries around your technological use. One thing that I do personally for my own mental health is I'll put my phone on the other side of the wall and I'll put it in a drawer. And I use a physical alarm clock to wake up in the morning because I don't want to wake up to my text messages and emails. And I start reading my messages and emails at 9 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. when I usually wake up in the morning. And I think that, humans weren't made to take in that much information. You know, the iPhone is fairly new. It's less than 15, 20 years old. And so life outside of social media is extremely important. But if you can set boundaries around what you are and are not willing to take home, even if you can put your laptop in your backpack, maybe like put away technology as soon as you're done with work and just be present with your loved ones or family, that's something that you can do to make sure that you have that discipline and self-care practice. And just a reminder, this is a practice. It's not something that we're going to be perfect at all the time. So giving yourself that grace and compassion as well.
The our cell phones, as handy as they are, um, they can they also can become a crutch. I've seen it where people are in social settings and they're feeling overwhelmed, and I see them just kind of do like this and bury themselves in their phones. And so I think also checking in about the why am I so connected to the phone? What does it do for me? I won't tell on anybody, but I know a couple of family members of mine, when they see that my phone is in the kitchen and I'm in the basement, somebody's checked in, like, did you know your phone? Yes, it was purposeful. It's because I knew I need to like not be connected to it. But it's very interesting how this is the world where we've come to know, where if you don't have a phone, people are asking you 10 million questions. But the reality is it shouldn't be that that's our first thing, like that we pick up the phone before we pick up the keys. Um, Social media is a great tool for many reasons, but we are still the greatest tools in this world. And I think when we sit here and have conversations with each other without social media, sometimes it's like this reminder of like, oh, wow, people are really great. Like, look, great eye contact, nice, bright smiles. And so there is an intentionality, though, that, had this conversation with people personally and professionally about at what age should a child have a cell phone. And I said, the cell phone is the equivalent of giving a child the keys to the car. It is life-changing. And if we had more conversations where we saw the cell phone from that perspective, I do think we would utilize it differently. So that's something I highly encourage, is how can you see the cell phone as a 2-ton car? Meaning how much of your life could it change if it's not used properly and effectively? What notifications can you turn off? Do you have to get an alert every time you get an email? Somebody was shocked when I told them, oh, you can set your Outlook to like not send you notifications between like certain hours, and then it'll resume. Like Helen, how you mentioned how you don't start until 9 a.m. You can turn it off from 5 p.m. until 9 a.m. so you don't get alerts or notifications. Um, with they also, now the phone, mine, a highlight of my week now is getting that notification saying you used your cell phone 1 hour less this week. I was like, I didn't know I had it set up, but thank you. Cause then I try to achieve um, it going down even further. So, we can't outrun social media, but we can change our relationship with it. Nothing about our lives is 150 characters or less. And I think that's part of the other issue, is we allowed social media to reduce our lives to 150 characters or less. We are so much more than that. And so how do we pull it back and say like, hey, I would love to hear what Helen has to say. And I know it's going to take more than 150 characters for her to say it.
Absolutely. Those are really powerful words. Thank you, Melissa and Helen. It's It's so important and it's really hard because like each of you have mentioned and like some people have said in the chat, it's become almost as necessary part of life, but being able to have that healthy relationship and as parents model that healthy relationship for your teens and youth is really important. This hour has totally flown by and I cannot believe it's almost the end. We could probably sit here and chat all afternoon together. And I've enjoyed it so much, but I'm going to end with one final question for each of you, just about resources. I know each of you are clinicians and are helping a lot of people throughout times of stress, throughout times where they might be dealing with increased stress, with increased mental health challenges. What resources do you often recommend or that are available to support mental health during times of stress or crisis?
One of the things that I often encounter when I talk to clients is cost of therapy. And I work for a private practice called Yellow Chair Collective, and we actually have a nonprofit called Entwine Community. Entwine Community is a $25 a session service for folks that don't have health insurance or maybe don't have access to insurance. And so the reason why the cost is so low is we train non-licensed clinicians who are still in graduate school, and we help others get access to therapy treatment through that vessel. We do have licensed clinical social workers and licensed psychologists supervising these clinicians. So it's called Entwine Community. Outside of that, I also recommend the suicide hotline, the crisis hotline, the Trevor Project, all of which I can put in the chat. And then I also recommend 3 meditation apps for folks who want to go through a guided meditation. Thanks for putting the link in the chat, Jackie. Um, Insight Timer, Headspace, and Calm are helpful. If you have Kaiser Insurance, Calm is free for you. So those are some things that have really helped my clients when I'm not in session with them.
Well, Helen named most of the ones I was gonna mention. But I will, there's a lot of different mental health providers who have also written books. And just one that I found to be particularly powerful is Homecoming by Dr. Thema Bryant. And part of why I enjoyed that particular book, I think she's a psychologist, and she's done a lot of work around trauma and how it lives in our physical bodies. And the book has assignments at the end of each chapter. And the goal is, how far away have you gotten from who you are? So going back to what we had talked about earlier, how Helen mentioned the friend who forgot her favorite foods, the assignments involve that. It says, list 5 things that you stopped doing that you really loved. And then it says, for the next week, you have to accomplish at least one of those things, whether it's once a week or every day. And it's basically homecoming. You're coming back to yourself. And when we live in a world filled with crisis and a lot of fear mongering, let's clear that up, because a lot of what we hear is fear mongering. It's this anticipatory fears that have been created. When you come back to who you are, your base, there's just this sense of peace that you're allowed to experience, even if it's like a cocoon for 5 minutes. So that's one that I highly recommend. And again, NAMI is there. Every state, it's run differently. So people will have different experiences based off of where they live. The local community service boards are becoming more active with outreach programs. Also, your local community, you'd be surprised sometimes, like I live in a small town. They have a lot of community-based activities. And again, it's about recreating that community if you've lost that community or if you want to establish a new one. So sometimes just if you have that neighborhood app, going on there and seeing what's going on, meetup.com. They have some really cool social groups and things, first timer events. I've had clients have really great experiences with, like, if you're not an avid hiker and you want to pick that up, joining a group through that, or crocheting, all of those things. So those are some of the ones that I found that have been very, very helpful.
Thank you both. You listed so many great things. We will be sure to include all of the links for the things mentioned in our follow-up material. Thank you again. I just want to remind folks, I've had a few questions. This is being recorded. It'll be emailed out to everyone within 1 week. Feel free to share it with anyone that you know that you feel it may be helpful for. I also reposted the link to request your certificate of attendance if you would like. Reposted a few links for our MHA Crisis Resource Center. I tried to keep up with a few of the things our speakers were mentioning, but like I said, we'll include all of those wonderful resources in our follow-up so that you have them directly. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Pelissa and Helen. It has been fantastic to share the space with you, to listen and learn from you. I know we've taken so much, and thank you to our audience for listening, for being here, for making comments, questions, sharing your own resources and stories in the chat. We always appreciate your engagement. I know it's going to be a busy next few weeks, holiday season. I hope everyone takes that time to take care of themselves throughout the holiday season, find those pockets and moments for self-care. And just one final moment of gratitude and big thank you to Helen and Pelissa.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all.